Both of my parents were emotionally abusive, and even though this is true, I don't hate them for it. And even though I'm in no contact with most of my family at this point, pretty much all of my family actually, I don't hate any of them. I don't really have any negative feelings toward them at all. Like some of them, I don't even feel anything anymore. And it's not because I don't wish them to be living their best lives. It's because we're just not compatible, and blood does not always equal family, okay? And family does not always equal blood. Sometimes the best kind of family are the ones that are not your blood. And the best thing that I learned from my emotionally abusive parents was that when you're in a fight, you need to fight. And I'm not talking about physically, but spiritually and emotionally, because there are documents that have revealed that emotional manipulation and emotional abuse can be just as traumatic and harmful as physical abuse. And I know that to be the case because the last thing that my dad told me when we were face to face, and this was years and years ago, this was before COVID actually. The last thing that he told me face to face was that I was an asshole and that I was basically an ungrateful kid that was unappreciative of everything that, him and my mom have done for me. And the last thing that he sent me in a text message was that I'm a pathetic person that doesn't deserve my name. And that kind of stuff at the time, it really, really hurt because I was just standing up for myself and I was tired of being abused. And whenever I called it out, now all of a sudden I'm the bad guy. That's what it felt like at the time. It was as if, the walls were always closing in. And every time I tried to point out that the walls were closing in, I would be spiritually whipped for it. And I didn't know why. I had no clue why. And it was only when I had the balls, really, to walk away from my family that I felt like, wow, that in of itself was a fight. The walking away was a fight. And when you are in the fight, you have to fight. And you have to, because I was fighting codependency, I was fighting narcissistic abuse. And again, I don't hate these people. I don't hate my family or anything that they stand for as far as people. But what I do hate about what happened was the actions and the behaviors that took place. And I'm at a point now to where I can maturely and look at this, I guess, in a mature way, so I suppose is the correct term. I can look at this in a mature way and think to myself, what did I really learn from that? Like, what else is there that I can learn from it? And it's not because I need to go into the past and look at the past, because sometimes you just need to accept the past for what it was and move forward. But I was called to in a prayer recently to look back on this in retrospect and maybe talk about the things that I learned from it so that people that maybe have abusive family can learn something as well. And I'm not saying everybody needs to take the path of going no contact like I did. In fact, I would use that as the last resort. And because I'm somebody that is a proponent of family. I want to see more family. I want to see more godly people. I want to see more longevity and legacy in family, praising the Most High God. However, I also understand that sometimes family is not blood, and sometimes blood is not really family, because there's a lot of generational curses and everything that my parents were dealing with. That's something that I didn't realize until a bit later, because I was so shocked by certain things that were said to me by my mom and my dad in our final moments of the relationship, really, that I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All I did was be able to say that, not everything is about them. Not everything is about them. And it doesn't need to be, and that's okay. But there's a hierarchy of feelings that are happening in the family, and I'm not okay with it. I don't like to be around this kind of stuff. And if you guys are going to persist in this kind of stuff, I simply cannot afford to be a part of it, because it's just too much. The mental health of this family is taking too much of a toll on my life to be around it. And that, even just saying that, like saying something like just saying something like that was a fight spiritually inside myself, because I was raised to be codependent. I was raised to put women on the pedestal. I was raised to always listen to parents, like always, always, always. And I was not necessarily rebellious, but I did have a tendency to question, and I was never allowed to question. And I always thought, like, why can't I question these things? I can't even make a question. Like, I can't, even if I think that it's a reasonable question, like, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm legitimately asking a question. Nope, no kinds of questions like that here. You know, and so I was raised in an environment where it was just very secluded, and the walls were always closing in. And every time you pointed it out, it was like the spiritual whip came out, right? That was the reality. And so it was just very difficult to breathe, really, spiritually speaking, because my parents were always there for me physically, 100%. Like, I will say that they always gave me food and a house, and they always gave me this, but they were never really like present. They were physically there, but they were never spiritually and emotionally present. Physically, they were there, but they were always somewhere else. And I remember my dad telling me at one point that like I had revealed a lot of these things that were coming up in me, and he told me that there are some things that happened in his life that he would take to the grave. And I'd have no clue what those things are. I have no clue. But, I mean, you know, I'm not going to try to force it out of him. I'm not going to try to do anything like that. But there was just a lot of lack of transparency. And the only thing that I can think of that was really the most profound thing that my parents really taught me was that when you're in a spiritual warfare, when you are in a spiritual fight for your life, you better fight with everything that you've got. And because they sure did. they sure did. And they were relentless. And I will give them that. Like, they were very, very relentless in how everything went about. I'll leave it at that. And it took me a lot of time to forgive them, but I don't hate them. And I forgave them not necessarily for them, but for myself. And through time, I was able to forgive them. But it was only by first forgiving myself that I was able to get to this point, to where I could actually forgive them from afar. But the thing is I forgive, but I don't forget. And I have learned those lessons, and I'm very grateful, actually. I'm very, very grateful for all of those hardships and tough life lessons, because I wouldn't have had the experience to go through these things and to be talking about stuff like this to thousands and thousands of people if it weren't for these experiences that I had. And at the time, I always thought that God was giving me these terrible cards. And it was hell. Like, it was actual hell. Those last words that my dad spoke to me through text, telling me to change my name, changed my life in a very, very profound way. Because it was as if the image of my father inside my psyche had died. before my eyes. And it was as if I really had to stand by myself. Like, and I didn't have God at the time when I was going through these things. Well, God was there, but I didn't feel God's presence really. But I knew, but like looking back, he was there. He was definitely guiding me naturally. But I was never really aware of what was actually happening until retrospect, because sometimes when you're in a traumatic situation, even like, because that was traumatic for me, absolutely. Just that whole situation, there's way more details that I could go into, but that's not something that I want to be putting out necessarily on YouTube here. But I do think that this kind of stuff and this kind of thing to talk about is going to be helpful and maybe relatable to some people. Because I don't think that I think no contact should be the last resort. Absolutely. For family members or friends like this that are just extremely toxic. But I also think that if it's too much, it's too much. And you've got to know your energy limitations around certain people, because sometimes you've just got to keep those people at a distance. Be kind, be cordial, but you can't go too deep with these people. You can't really, it has to be surface level. And that kind of stuff can be beautiful. It can be. That kind of surface level interaction can be beautiful. And if the possibility ever arose that we could repair the relationship, like I could repair the relationship with my mom and my dad, I would totally be open to that. But they would have to take accountability for it. They would have to take accountability for what they did, and they'd have to show me through certain things of repentance and moving toward a well-being that is much more grounded than what was happening before for that to happen. I will always keep the doors to relationships with family like that open, but I will keep the door locked sometimes. And I will lock the door if I see that it's not going to happen. Like if that door is open, but they're going to take advantage of the door being open, I'm going to shut that door and lock it, and until the storm passes. And sometimes you just need to walk away from certain situations, but that doesn't mean that you can't really, especially with family, because the closest bond that you're ever going to have in the world is between your mother and your father. But that doesn't mean that you should keep the door closed unless something drastic has happened and all that. But even if it does get repaired, I'm going to keep them at a distance, 110%. Like, they are not getting too close with me in my life ever again. But I will keep that door open as a possibility, because I know that Jesus Christ can save anybody. But sometimes it's not going to work out. And I don't think that that's going to ever be something that works out, unfortunately. But the biggest takeaway that I learned from my family in general, but especially my parents, was how profound spirituality really is, and how profound life is. And you need to be grateful for when you are experiencing that joy, because as Carl Jung says, as deep as the roots are, so too are the branches of heaven. As deep as the roots are to hell, so too are the branches to heaven. And the branches of heaven can be a blessing to see, but it takes certain levels and roots of hell to see those kinds of things, to have that tree grow like that inner tree per se. And so this, I hope, is an encouraging message to anybody that is going through stuff like this. And especially around the holiday times when, people kind of get a little bit more lonely and depressed and all of this stuff. It's like, you don't need to be this way. And seasonal depression is just a spirit of demonicness, as far as I'm concerned. And so what's absolutely going to be necessary for you at this time is to accept where you are, accept what's going on, and move accordingly and be truthful. Like saying that stuff to my parents and my family about what I was really feeling was, man, my knees were shaking, my heart was racing. Like, just being who I was almost like it triggered my flight or fight response. Just being who I was, but now it's not like that anymore. And thank God for that. But I'll always keep that door, the possibility of the door opening, that's a possibility. But until then, until I see some signs of repentance and such, or accountability, it's a no-go. So, with all that being said, I hope this message was useful and insightful. I hope that people got something from it that maybe they can relate to or understand, or maybe just see a little bit differently. And again, I don't hate anybody. I don't wish anybody ill will. I want to see everybody turn to Christ. But at the same time, I understand that there are going to be some people that are just so lost in the dark that, like my dad said, he's going to take some things to the grave. And if he chooses to really do that, well, that's his prerogative. That's his choice. And I can't do anything about that. But if you do want to join the Regal Change Academy, where we've got a great group of godly people, men and women, in the community, we have a free Discord available for you with some free resources, as well as the Regal Change Academy that is paid. And you get a weekly group call, a weekly Bible study, as well as a bunch of other different kinds of classes and courses available to help you build your purpose, help you build your relationships, as well as just yourself in general. And all of that is just $10 a month that you can cancel at any time. So I also want to thank everybody moving from YouTube over to X and Rumble recently. I appreciate the support. And with all that being said, peace be with you all. Till next time.